Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this Dorset Council Q&A session, where tonight we're going to be focusing on next year's budget. We've got a number of questions that have been submitted, and I'll be inviting our panel tonight to respond to those questions, but we hope that you'll also be posting some of your questions in the chat tonight as we go through the presentation. First of all, I'm going to hand over and introduce our panel for tonight. My name's Sam Crowe. I'm the Interim Chief Executive of Dorset Council. I'm joined by Nick.
Evening.
I'm joined by Councillor Simon Clifford. And also Aidan Dunn.
Yeah, hi Sam, great to be here. So I'm Aidan Dunn, I'm an officer of the council, I'm the Chief Finance Officer, so I'll be providing some of the financial context for this evening's discussions.
That's great. So before we get to the questions, Aidan's just going to walk us through a very short presentation which gives an overview of the main elements to the budget. Over to you, Aidan.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Sam. So we've got a few slides just to help viewers orientate them with the budget. So I'll start by just right down to the basics. Our financial year as a council runs from the 1st of April to the 31st of March. And our budget for next year was approved by full council almost a month ago on the 11th of February. So there's a vote, a political vote, and the budget was voted through. So when we've been through a very detailed and complex budget setting process, as you quite imagine. We recognise it's a really challenging time for our residents. The cost of living challenge still hasn't gone away. Bills are rising for everybody, be they water, electricity, heating. So we really recognise that as a council. But the council's costs are going up too. And I just wanted to give a bit of context for that. What we've got on this slide in front of us shows the overall budget for the council for next year. So the total budget is 417 million, 417. So that's in the bottom right hand corner. And what we're trying to describe on this slide here is where that money is going to be spent. And what you can see in the top two boxes on the left hand side, the vast majority of our spend is on adult social care in terms of 160 million, and we spend around about 72 million on children's social care. So those are the big demand-driven statutory services that we have to provide services for, really important services for our residents. So when we're going through a budget setting exercise, we have to take into account how many more residents we'll be supporting next year. And we know we've got one of the oldest populations in the country. So we know that our pressures in social care are going up. We also, so not only the number of people supporting, but also the cost of supporting those residents. We know, for example, the costs of care are going up, not least because of the national insurance increases. So we've got about to set a budget setting exercise that takes account of those cost increases. And what we've identified is actually, if we did nothing, if we made no changes to our plans, then we actually needed a budget nearer 450 million pounds rather than the 417 million that we're setting. So the council is taking some really, it's a challenging budget. We're having to make savings and efficiencies, so we're looking to avoid costs. We are making services. We're looking to generate additional income as well. And viewers may have seen in the local media, we're talking about staffing reductions as well. So all of that comes together to give us our budget package for next financial year, 417 million, over half of it on social care, but just a couple of other numbers that you can see on there on the slides. And once again, all available on our website. We spend a large amount of money, sort of 30 plus million on waste collection. We've got figures in there for libraries, you've got figures in for education and housing as well. Get a real sense of the variety of services that the council provides, and not least one that's very familiar to many of our residents, highways and parking, which no doubt we'll talk about shortly. So that's where our money is spent. And if we move on to the next slide, I wanted to touch on where does our money come from. So there's our net budget, 417 million. The vast majority of that funding does come from council tax. So 82% of our funding comes from local residents. And it's really important that we hear what our local residents think about how the councils operates and organised, and hence sessions like this evening. So council tax, part of the budget that's been approved, is increasing next year. There's just under 3% increase on the council tax bill, then a further 2% relating to social care. And those council tax bills will be going out next week and beyond. We also gather around about collect 70 million or so from business rates. And then the two small numbers at the bottom, this makes Dorset quite exceptional. The amount we get from government directly is very, very slim compared to many councils. So new homes bonus, so this is funding for new houses that are being built, government gives us around about 3.2 million. And finally, the revenue support grant, the grant that government gives us for being a council, we get a very low amount, 1.8 million. Other councils are getting 40 million or so as well. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So Sam, just to finish on the next slide, to set the scene, challenges and changes. So we are seeing a growing cost of service delivery, as I've outlined, in particular pressures on social care. We are, in terms of the pressures, government, the new government, change of government policy, we're actually seeing money move away from rural counties such as Dorset. In particular, the Southwest is struggling with this. Money is moving from the rural counties into more urban councils. So that's why our government funding is so relatively low. So we are reliant on council tax, which is why our council tax is high, because our costs are high and we need to fund and meet those costs for those services for our residents. But as a council, we're not complacent. As I said, we're making £44 million worth of efficiencies, service changes, increasing our income and cost reductions in order to balance our books. So hopefully, Sam, that sort of sets the scene from an officer perspective to set the scene for the conversation today. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Aidan. So as you can see, complex budget, lots of moving parts, lots of things that need to be balanced, but I think you've taken us through that really well, probably as simply as we could do it tonight. So I'd just like to invite other panel members, if you've got any comments, please. Simon.
I can jump in there, Simon. Apologies, my PC dropped out just as you got to the introduction. So I'm Councillor Simon Clifford. I'm the ward member for Chickerell, but the cabinet member for finance and capital strategy. And I think Aidan's given a really good oversight then of the tough world in which we as a council are living at the moment. And just as an example, councils on average around the country get 44% of their income comes from government, which leaves them with 56% of their income coming from council tax. Dorset is 17% of their income coming from government, which means 83% of our income comes from council tax. It just goes to reinforce how reliant we are on council tax. And as a politician, nobody wants to put council tax up, but also as a politician, there's absolutely no choice in the matter.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, so we've got a number of questions that have come in before tonight's session. So I'm going to start to bring those up. And if I just click on the first one, you should start to see it on your screens. So Neil has written in to ask how much is anticipated to be received in the form of double council tax premiums on second homeowners, and what has been assumed about the percentage of second homeowners who decide to sell. So who wants to take that one? Simon?
Let me dive in on that one. So again, Simon Clifford, cabinet member for finance, which is why it's probably appropriate. So the two-part question: how much do we think we're going to receive in double council tax on second homeowners? We think they're around about 6,000 second homes, which might be lower than people anticipate when you hear the stories about how towns, on coastal towns in particular, are blighted by second homeowners. So around about 6,000 homes. We believe our double payments will be in the realms of £8 million. So there will be an element of people who will convert their homes away from short-term lets and Airbnb, and maybe go to longer-term lets, which means that there'll be a bigger rental market in Dorset, which could be seen as a positive. There will be some people who decide enough is enough and they will sell, which puts housing back into the market. But we're taking a fairly prudent guesstimate this year, and it will be this year. We'll have hard data next year once we've actually received the money. The answer is round about 6,000 homes will produce round about £8 million of income.
It's probably worth pointing out, Sam, that this council last year took a decision to ring fence some of the money we've raised. So 40% will be raised of whatever we raise will eventually be spent on housing in some form or other.
Thank you, Dick. That's really, really good to know. And thank you for the answer, Simon. I'm going to move on to our next question now. This is from Neil again, who's written in to say 46.7 million is allocated to corporate services and central finance, but what is the total cost of administration, taking into account the administration of all council service provisions? And I think, Aidan, you're going to dive into that one from us.
Will do, Sam. Thanks, Neil. So just to give a context, in the earlier slide where I showed about the different areas that we're spending our money, the one in the bottom right-hand corner was talking about corporate services and central finance, and it showed £46.7 million. And essentially, what this is the cost of running the council in terms of the services I oversee in my day job. So this is the cost of the finance team, the HR team, the IT team, transformation. So the majority of it is staffing costs. In terms of central finance, we've got an amount in there, in that amount for contingency as well. So around about £13 million of contingency. So this is money in case sort of set aside in case pressures sort of costs go up during the course of the year. So that's how the budget is made up in terms of that 46.7 million, and there's a lot more detail in our cabinet papers and council papers that explains all that. In terms of Neil's question, what is the total cost of administration taking into account all council service provisions? The difficulty is there's a different way of cutting the budget, in the sense that our individual services, be it social care, that includes the staffing costs of social care, for example, and staffing costs for highways. So they're all accounted for differently. So I think the easiest way to answer this is that the pay bill for the council, the pay related costs, is around about £213 million for next financial year. That's what we've budgeted for. But very clearly, and perhaps Simon, you might want to come in on this, sort of part of the challenge we've got is how do we reduce that pay bill in order to make the council more efficient, provide even better services whilst reducing the pay bill. So perhaps I come to you, Simon.
Yes, so we did this in two ways. So first of all, we sat down, Aidan and I and cabinet members sat down with all the directors and went through what they do and looked to where we thought there might be efficiencies, where we might be able to slim things down and make some savings. Because as Aidan's outlined, we've had to find £40+ million in order to meet our budget. The second way of doing this was looking at, well, if we're not going to do it straight away, how can we transform the council in such a way that it will be a slimmer, smaller workforce, but it will still achieve everything we need the council to achieve. It will still look after vulnerable adult people, it will still keep children safe, it will still fill in the potholes and collect your waste and put books on library shelves. So do all those kind of things that people really value. And so we have launched a very complex transformation program, which will look at all the efficiencies that we can make, and it will start looking at how the council runs itself. And that will be through the administration. We are already taking some really big steps towards that, and the whole programme launches in just over, in fact, a few weeks' time on the 1st of April. But already we've got a clear idea of how much we need to save, and it'll be about £10 million for the next year. We know where we're starting from, and we know the milestones along the way that will indicate how well we're doing to get there. It's a really big challenge. What's really interesting about it is it's a cross-party challenge. So we've invited in members of the opposition parties to come and play a full part in how we design and then how we go through the whole process in order to deliver the savings that we need. It's one of these areas people will experience of councillors and politicians might be shouting at each other across the divide, and that does happen, of course it does, and there's some point scoring going on, but actually behind the scenes there's a lot of really good work carried out with some very talented councillors from all parties, and this is an area where I'm quite excited with. We've got high calibre opposition members who are coming in supporting the very high calibre cabinet members already in there, and I'm very confident that we will deliver what we need to. It's a great question, Neil. And as Aidan says, it depends on what you mean by administration. But the key for us is we're going to look at how we can make running ourselves cheaper, but not lose any of those key support services that we want. Nick, do you want to chip in on that?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? We're in a tight situation financially, and we need to go forward together. There's 82 members of Dorset Council, and we are all working together to make this happen. But I'm looking at the next question that's coming up about budgets in terms of parking. So I don't know if we want to move straight onto that, because I think it sort of illustrates the challenge in terms of the comparisons. So the next question was also from Neil. So Neil's been very busy, and it's in the questions on the screen there. Parking's a bit of a hot topic, which is why we're actually going to run a parking review soon. Parking hasn't had a review for about 3 years now, and so we're going to look across party about how we address this. But to answer your question, so the budgeted income we're expecting from parking is around about £12.8 million, which if you compare that to the first slide that Aidan showed about budgets, so in comparison with adult social care, for example, which is 160 odd million, 12.8 is quite small beer. That 12.8 is basically tied. We can't spend it anywhere, so we get about 12.8 income. It cost us around about 4.6 million to actually provide the parking service, so the balance around 8.2 goes towards our highways budget, and the highways budget in total is around about 14 million, so less than 10% adult social care, and the balance of that is met from council tax. So around about 5.86 million is met from council tax and some central government funding, which we have to bid for generally. But it shows that if you stop the average person on the street say in Dorchester and South Street, and you ask them what Dorset Council do for you, chances are they would say they collect our bins, they provide car parks, they fill our potholes. Reality is the vast majority of our money, as Aidan's already pointed out, is spent on social care, and that's a demand-led budget, and why our finances are so stretched. And the next question is on waste, so I think I'm going to answer that one as well, I believe. So
just bringing that up now, Nick. So Neil again has asked, within the waste management category, how much is budgeted for the transport and disposal of waste to out-of-county incineration and landfill destinations, and how many tonnes of waste is this?
Yeah, so incineration's a bit of a hot topic again, with the proposed Portland incinerator, which Dorset Council refused planning permission for. So we basically budget around about £8.6 million for dealing with waste. We deal with around about 62,000 tonnes of waste. That's metric tonnes rather than imperial. And we collect that from the curbside. And it should be pointed out that Dorset Council is the #1 unitary best recycling authority in the country, in England anyway. I was at a climate conference last week, and our recycling rates were envied by many. So this waste is collected from the curbside, and we treat it in Camford, in Poole. And essentially we sift through the waste. We remove metals for recycling. Organic material goes for composting and generating gas, which is used further on. And most of what's left doesn't go to landfill anymore. It goes to what I'll call incinerators. People call them energy for waste facilities. They are what they are. They are incinerators. It's a reality of waste collection. It's a statutory duty that we have, is that we've got some stuff left and we have to do something with it. And landfill is really expensive. It's also not great for the environment. Burning stuff isn't great for the environment, but it's actually better than landfill. But what we do is we reduce the amount we send to the energy facilities every year. I think we're down to about 35,000 tonnes. We're reducing it year on year. The reality is, if everybody put everything in the right bin, we'd send a lot less. So if you're watching, and I hope you are, please use the recycling bins as they're designed. So around about 30% in the black bin type stuff, could actually be recycled. And so if that 30% was taken out, it would help us a lot.
Thank you, Nick. That's really comprehensive. Right. The next question we've got is from John.
Just we move in.
Sorry, Simon.
Move on,
Go
so,
for it.
yeah, I think it's only fair that when we're talking about car parking, we should talk about the charge that we initially had in our budget and then took out, which is the charge for evening overnight parking charges. I have had approaches from a number of councillors, from Shaftesbury in particular and Wimborne, where they are arguing their towns are designed in such a way that there's very little on-street parking, and so where we had a proposal that was going to fill a budget gap with roundabouts £250,000, or slightly less than that, but roundabouts £250,000, we heard what people were saying. The local media in various parts of the county was saying that there is a perceived impact on hospitality in particular. So we listened to what people were saying, and at our budget meeting back in February, we took it out. The proposal took it out in favour of a review, and I think it's only fair that we explain to people the thinking behind that. Before we just to add to that, two things that Aidan very slightly touched on are we are facing an extra bill of about £6 million for national insurance. That's both with the council and support that we can offer. We are also losing out on £5 million of government grants that we had previously. So there's £11 million of extra costs there immediately. So when I described the two approaches we took to raising the budget in the first place, one of which was looking at all services in the eye to say, what can you spare? One of them was putting forward a proposal that we knew would be unpopular, which was car park charges for evenings and overnights. Once we launched it, we realised that there were, in some areas, and the two councillors in Shaftesbury and Wimborne in particular were very vocal about how much that will cost people in their town where they had little choice other than to use council car parks. £17.50 was a figure that was going around per week. So we then thought, well, can we bring in a permit that will help that? And we came up with an idea, £50 permit, which would take those charges away from £2.50 a night to just over 95p per night, which seemed far more doable. But there was even further pressure from people saying, actually, there is a very difficult set of scenarios out there with people struggling to pay their bills. £50 upfront is difficult and challenging. We then had further questions about, does that include on-street car parking and how does that work? So in the end, it all got so difficult that we put it in we can't do that. Let's just move on. We'll accept that we're going to get criticised. We are going to carry out a U-turn. The famous politicians never like to admit to it. Well, we did. We listened to people. We decided it wasn't appropriate. We found a different source to make up the budget shortfall, and we are not going to bring in overnight and evening car park charges. And I think this is part of us as a new administration trying to be really honest and upfront about the way decisions are made. We've looked at it, and it was really clear from businesses that they didn't like the imposition. They couldn't see how it was going to help them at all, and they were saying it would penalise them. And so we took it on the chin and took the criticism on the chin. And I think fair enough. That's where we are and the decision we took. Sorry to dive in on you there, Nick.
No, it's fine. But one of the interesting things you just mentioned about the 11 million quid that essentially we've lost through the Labour government employers, national insurance increase, and the withdrawal of our grants, that 11% represents around just over 3% of our council tax rises. So we're only allowed to raise council tax by 5%, and you've already lost over 3% before you even start talking about inflation and all that other stuff. So it makes balancing the budget really challenging, but we've managed to do it.
We've been very polite about where money is coming from and politics. So when I said earlier on talking about cross-party, there is cross-party support. All parties in this council berate all the national governments of whatever political colour there are, saying you're penalising Dorset, you have not got fair funding for Dorset, and you really ought to stand. We are standing up for Dorset, and they ought to recognise that. We are carrying on that campaign, again, cross-party with a change of government, and still it's falling on deaf ears. In fact, you might even say that we had hoped that a Labour government might be slightly more generous to local government. That's not the case at all. In fact, it looks the complete opposite just at the moment.
Sam, in a non-political way, can I jump in as well and underline the points?
Absolutely, go for it, Aidan.
So just from thanks. So from a financial perspective, I think just kind of viewers might might be aware that a number of councils across the country are struggling. So it was about 7 or 8 have declared effective bankruptcy with Section 114 notice. And then a couple of weeks ago, the government announced councils that were going to get exceptional financial support because they were struggling so much. And I think that's another 30 councils. We're fortunately, and it's not just by luck, but it's well managed, and well led. We're not in that position, but it is a tough budget. And the argument that we have as a local authority is, first of all, that of the national money that's available for local government, we should get a bigger share, because we don't think that the costs of a rural authority are appropriately taken into account in the funding distribution. So the fact that our bus services cost much more because the buses have to travel so much further, the fact that social care costs so much more because the domiciliary care workers have to travel so far between individual houses because we're a spaced out rural county, I think our argument is that government is not hearing that and not taking account of that in the formula. So we're doing lots of work behind the scenes, lobbying, meeting with MPs, trying to convince a change of the national formula. But also we're arguing that the amount of money spent on local government in total should be increased as well. But we also recognise that's very difficult for the government at the moment. We're seeing the economic indicators, we're seeing the pressure to spend more on defence. If you spend more on defence, where do you spend less on? So it's a really difficult quandary for national government. But we, I think, as Simon's described and Nick have described, cross-party are lobbying for more for Dorset, because if we don't, then we're increasingly reliant on our local council taxpayer, and that's a position we find ourselves in. So hopefully a non-political point, but it's a real challenge for us as a council.
Thank you, Aidan.
I think it's fair enough. I don't think an excuse. It is the reality that a rural county has services that are more expensive. And Sam, you'll know this because it's your area of professional expertise anyway. The Dorset population age is extraordinarily high compared to other counties. So tell me if I'm wrong, Sam, because I haven't got the figures only at the top of my head. 30% of Dorset's population is over 65 years of age, against a national average of 19%. Now, that's close to twice as many. It's a really, really high figure. And more than that, in 10 years' time, the figure of people over 85 will have increased by 45%. So close to doubling number of people who are over 85. They're all people who we will be supporting through these very expensive social care services that we've been talking about. So again, it's not politics, it's just reality, and it's not an excuse, it's reality, but that is the quandary in which we find ourselves. So the government, we just have to keep the pressure on the government to say rural counties have really specific needs and really specific requirements that aren't funded, and the government have got to find a way to help us.
Thank you, Simon. Pretty spot on with those figures there as well. So just before we carry on with the questions, I'm just going to point out we've only got another 2 submitted questions. So if you're watching live tonight and you want to put any questions to the panel based on what you've heard so far, please do put them in the comments section. And now we're going to change tack a little bit, and we're going to start to talk about housing. And John has asked, how many tenants of properties that do not meet standards required for letting contribute council tax to Dorset Council? Now, I have to say this was a much longer question, but there was a lot of sort of personal detail about an individual case in there, which we've removed for obvious reasons because we're hosting this session in public tonight. But the essence of the question is, how many tenants that are in properties that don't meet our standards may be contributing council tax to our Dorset Council tax collection? And I think...
Yeah,
Aidan,
shall I come in on this? And as you say, we've got John's kindly shared his contact details, and we're in sort of conversation with him behind the scenes. I think there's a couple of themes of John's question. First of all, how much of the council tax that we should collect do we actually collect? So at the moment, our collection rate, it's called, is 96.2%. So ideally we'd collect 100%. We're collecting 96% in year. We usually catch up the following year. And in terms of how that compares to councils around the country, we've got a really good collection rate, which is a testament to good residents. Thank you, residents, for paying, but also well done to our revenues and benefits team who collect the money very effectively. I think John's particular and specific question is around this sort of issue of properties being rented out, who's responsible and when, and does the council keep on top of that? So really simply, very simply, if a property is being rented out, then typically the tenant will pay. If a property isn't being rented out, but is intended to be, then it will be the landlord that would pay council tax. So those are the principles. And I think John's describing a situation where there was some building work going on, who's to pay. But I think the crucial thing is if we're not up to date at the moment, then we do catch up, So we've got a very effective revenues and benefits team that do sort of pursue outstanding sort of council tax collections as required. So, but the principle is if there's a tenant, the tenant should pay. If there isn't a tenant, the landlord should pay. There are some exceptions to that when there's building works going on. And I think that's the issue that we'll be talking to John about directly behind the scenes.
Great. Thank you, Aidan. If I move to the next question, that's from Jennifer, who asks, why is it so hard to communicate with the council? There are so many different departments and they generally don't speak to one another. This is frustrating and time expensive. So who's going to take this one?
I think I'll start off with that one, Sam. It's something, unfortunately, we do hear fairly frequently, and it's one of the things we're going to be addressing through our future council transformation program, which has already been alluded to. I think that part of the problem is that Dorset Council came into existence back in 2019. It was 6 councils into one. Some of the systems that we still have date from that time. We don't have a single overall customer relationships management system, and that's one of the things we're looking at. It's frustrating, not only just for members of the public, also for councillors who, when we do ward work, there's stuff you have to repeat stuff a lot. So we are working hard to change that. It's not going to be overnight. It's probably going to take a couple of years, I suspect. But just be assured that we are working on that, and we will make things better. I sort of have an aspiration that maybe you should be able to have the equivalent of maybe a Sky webpage type of thing. If you've got a Sky account, so you can pick and choose, and you can access everything. So your bin collections and your social services, everything on one page, one account. And unfortunately, that's not the case at the moment. But that's our aspiration.
Simon, do you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, I think it's a really sharp question, actually, because it drives me mad the way that public service and public sector doesn't really engage with the public very well. So for instance, one of the things that really bugs me is which bin goes out when. Is it recycling week or is it rubbish week? And a simple text coming from a council that I could sign up to, which would let me know. I must go on the website every second or third week. I've forgotten which one it is and which one to put out. And it's that two-way communication. So it's not just people trying to find out stuff about us, it's us helping them and realizing the sort of information they need. It can't be beyond the wit of man for us at Dorset to set up that kind of thing. And that's going to be part of the transformation program we've been talking about, where how can we use technology better? And that's not just better to make it more efficient and cheaper, but actually provide a better service for the public. Because Jennifer, you're right, it is hard to communicate with the council. We don't have a single point, a single call centre where all the calls come into. That's going to be part of the transformation, where we bring things in and start to make efficiencies in terms of getting rid of the 3 or 4 medium-sized call centres we've got and having one really well-run and efficient one. The other thing is, of course, is that communication has changed so much over the last 10 years, last 5 years. The fact is, in the old days, we'd be taking this conversation now on the road and sitting in village halls and having a conversation and talking to people one-to-one. Instead, we're doing it online, and that's a great advance. It has its advantages and disadvantages. We did try to take our cabinet meetings on the road, and we're still committed to do that, aren't we, Nick? But
yeah.
What we found is, in order to have a hall that's big enough that you can get everyone in that you need to, and also to broadcast, you find that you get the hall, but it won't have the IT, or we get the IT and we can't find a hall big enough. So there are some really big challenges that we've got to overcome. Because Jennifer's right, we want to be out there, we want to be talking to people, before the budget launched, we did a live conversation, the big conversation, to try to find out what people's views are. But it's relatively small numbers. Let's be honest about it, and it's not comprehensive. So I think there's a tremendous amount that we would like to do, and I would say that we need to do in order to improve our communications. Back in the day, the council would have 4 or 6 newsletters going out explaining where the budget is being spent and where the money is going, and people's council tax, and whether they're getting value for money or not. Now we're limited, much more limited, because of government involvement in how many times you can communicate with your own public. So I think there's some challenges for us, but I think we are up for it, and we've got some really exciting plans that will see us communicate far better.
I have another example of quite poor communication, or very poor. I run the risk of slagging off Dorset Council now, but we represent the organisation, and so one of my residents reported a warning sign had broken. So one of the triangular warning signs on a highway, basically the metal post had rotted and rusted, and it fallen down. So they reported it, being good citizens, and they used the online website and reported it. Got acknowledgement, and then about a month later got another acknowledgement saying it had all been resolved. But when the resident went to have a look, the sign wasn't there. The post had been taken away, the broken post, and there was no sign. And so, of course, they pinged me as the local ward member, and I had to get involved. And it hadn't been resolved. It basically moved from one system to another, and the one system closed it and sent an automated message back to the resident. And in fact, it had gone to another system, which had raised the job for the thing to be replaced. But the communication we gave back to the resident was completely wrong, and unsurprisingly, they got slightly annoyed. So we've got a lot of work to do to change things, and it's making sure systems talk to each other, probably getting rid of a lot of them and creating a new one. But we can get better, and we are working very hard to do so.
Thank you, Nick. So we've had the first of our sort of live questions being submitted by viewers tonight. I'm going to go to the first one, which has come in from David, who asks, how can Dorset Council or BCP Council really help boost tourism with regard to elements that they have control over, such as planning, car park charges, events? Who wants to take this one first? Simon. Thank you.
Yeah, let me start off with this. And before I answer the question, I don't know if people online have seen, but there's the most extraordinary attack on Weymouth by the Daily Mail today, that basically said it was a rubbish place, and it was just a diatribe of nonsense. But it will have a detrimental impact on tourism into the Weymouth and surrounding areas. So first off, I want to call that out for a complete load of rubbish that it was. I mean, just joke journalism. Weymouth and the surrounding areas are a fantastic magnet for tourism. Weymouth is regularly the best beach in the UK and in the top 20 beaches in the world. So it has a huge amount going for it. But what can a council do? It is limited. Dorset works very closely with Weymouth Town Council in particular, and on that area. There are events, it looks after the beach. Water quality is an issue that I'll throw to Nick in a moment on where we are with that. But across the whole of the coastline, we've got some amazing opportunities and really, really high quality attractions for people to come and attend. It is slightly limited on what a council can do, and I think there are elements with planning. We've been talking about second homes and trying to drive out more income from that, which we can reinvest in cheaper, affordable housing for elsewhere. Car park charges is always going to be an issue. We are doing this review, as Nick said, we haven't had a review for a number of years, and we are looking really closely at the impact car park charges have. On the whole, I suspect people come on holiday and put up with the council with the car park charges, as opposed to go on holidays or make a decision on where they're going to go on holiday based on car park charges. I think there will be an element of cost that factors into families coming to Dorset, but also we've got to look at inland. The attraction, if someone comes for a beach holiday, they will visit Shaftesbury, they will go to Sherborne, they will go to Wimborne and across the coastline. I think we've got some really great opportunities to boost tourism. But Nick, if I come to you with the water quality, because that is an issue.
Yeah, I'll talk about water quality in a second. Just to carry on from what you were just saying, one of the things we're trying to do is make Dorset an all-season destination. It's very seasonal at the moment, and the jobs, although they're welcome, they're not well paid. The seasonal jobs. Places like Dorchester and other places, they've got museums. They can be destinations all year round. We've got better arts facilities now than we've ever had in Dorset for, certainly since I've lived down here for over 25 years. And that's one of the things we're trying to do. An issue has been that the central government like to talk to one central, basically tourism organisation, and historically Dorset and BCP haven't had one of those. I don't know why. There was some disagreement. I think we've finally managed to nail it. I think that the MPs have signed off on it, and we will have some sort of organisation, because that attracts money. Without that, you can't get the grants. Devolution was also a potential. We've talked about devolution for the last few months. We're not on the priority programme. One of the things devolution promises is money for tourism. So hopefully that will come along. In terms of water quality, water quality isn't under Dorset Council's control. It's down to Wessex Water, mostly in Dorset Council's area. I think there's another water company slightly to the east. We are in conversation with them and the Environment Agency to try and improve water quality. I'm trying to get our scrutiny committees to look at water quality as well. Blue flag beaches are an issue, so it's been wildly trailed, and it was mentioned in the Mail article that Simon's just alludes to, that Weymouth is likely to lose its blue flag beach. It actually has 3, I believe, but the main one is probably going to go. It's probably down to sewage leaks. We're trying to deal with a sewage system which, let's face it, is probably over 100 years old, and sewage is mixed with basically groundwater runoffs, and if it overflows, it has to go somewhere. And if it doesn't go into the sea or into rivers, it'll end up coming up through your Kazi, basically. So it does have to go somewhere, and there's a lot of investment required. We are pressing our MPs to talk to people nationally to address water quality, and we never stop doing that, because water quality is extremely important. That's all I can really say. It's something we're dealing with all the time, and it's never going to go away until we get some central government funding, I think, to really invest in our water supply. At least new housing does have separate sewage and groundwater facilities. So the more new houses we build, essentially the problem will eventually get better.
Thank you, Nick.
Have we lost
on this one, Sam? This is a question about helping young people living in the Dorset Council area. People finding it hard to find housing. I think if I start off on this, and I think it's probably one that everyone can chip in. So I think there's an element here of there's a great opportunity in South Dorset at the moment to land some very big, mainly green energy based projects that are of a national significance. And the importance of that is that they will produce the jobs that people need. So that it's not a simple answer. There's a question from Katie. It's not a simple answer, Katie, as opposed to how can we build affordable houses. You need to do everything. You need to have affordable housing. You need to have the right infrastructure that will attract businesses in. You need to have the jobs that people can then apply for and get. And to do that, you need the skills and education to enable you. So it's a really holistic approach. So you need to work hard at absolutely everything. And one of the discussions that we've been having as a party and with senior officers is to stop thinking about what we as the Liberal Democrats want to achieve in our four remaining years in power. It's much more on where do we want Dorset to be in 15 years, 15 to 20 years? How do we get there? And underpinning everything is how can we keep our population, our younger people here? How can we build the affordable houses? How can we get the skills and training in place? And where are we going to find the jobs? And the really exciting thing is the jobs part of it looks like it's a runner. We've got 4 schemes that are around about the Weymouth, Portland area, but the travel to work area will take in most of Dorset should they come in. And Nick, I'll throw to you, but for me, it's a once in a generational opportunity to land nationally important schemes that will do everything that Katie wants, but overall will just improve lifestyles and life opportunities in our county.
Yeah, I agree. There's a huge opportunities for jobs, especially in the green economy, in the blue economy. in Dorset. And as Simon has just said, mostly centred around South Dorset, but we shouldn't forget places like Gillingham, for example, as well, where we're putting in lots of houses. It's got great connectivity in terms of the A303s just across the border. It's got a mainline railway. So there's opportunities elsewhere in the county. One of our council priorities, we've got a new council plan, is to build genuinely affordable housing, and more of it. Dorset Council has a load of land. We went from 6 councils into 1. A lot of the land we don't need anymore. Obviously we can sell it, and we can get a capital receipt, and we can use that to do other things. But one of the things we've tasked our officers to do is, before they actually think of selling a bit of land, is to ask ourselves the question: can we build on it? Is it suitable for building? And if it is suitable for building, then we'll be looking to approach RPs, registered providers, housing associations, as people will know them, and give them the opportunity to build on our land. Because if you take away the land value from the equation, essentially it means it's a lot easier for registered providers to build houses which are genuinely available at social rent. And by affordable, we mean social rent. We don't mean the national government's definition, which 80% of market value, which is unaffordable for most people who live and work in Dorset. So we have an aspiration to do that. If we have to build our own council houses, we will. And I'd love to build some ourselves, and we have the capability to do that. And as Simon said, this is not a 4-year project; it's long term. But we have the opportunity as the current administration to put those foundations in place, so that in 15, 20 years' time, when all these jobs are rolling in, people will have somewhere to live.
Sam, can I just jump in quickly as well? So Nick and Simon both said about sort of senior officers being sort of connected with this, and they're entirely right. This, it feels quite personal. This, I was born and bred in Dorset, and moved away because there weren't the jobs available as once I'd sort of finished my education. But I've been really fortunate to move back and to a place I love, as I'm sure Katie is describing here as well. But as a council, it would be very easy for us, as we sort of said at the beginning, to concentrate just on our aging demographic. That's the big problem. We need to provide care. What we're describing as a council, actually, and the long-term vision that Simon and Nick have just described, this is at the heart of our council plan that was approved just before Christmas. Economic development, looking at housing, and we touched on our second homes policy of putting doubling the council tax on second homes. So part of that is to try and bring houses back into sort of mainstream use, as it were, rather than as holiday homes. So I think what Katie is describing, what she'd like, jobs, skills, economic development, housing, is absolutely at the heart of what we're trying to achieve as a council. And I think there's sort of full commitment from all of us. It does take time, but my goodness, it's what we all want to achieve.
Thank you, Aidan. So we're reaching the end of our questions for tonight. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and watching tonight's session on the budget. If you've got any further information that you'd like on the budget, there's a really handy budget explainer called Our Budget Explained on the Dorset Council website. Please do have a look at that if you want to go over any of the figures or any of the elements of the budget that you've heard discussed tonight. And then just one final thought before we close. If you've been interested in the discussion tonight, if you've enjoyed hearing from your politicians and from officers at Dorset Council, just a reminder that actually many of our committees are held in public. You can either watch online as they're happening, or you can tune in later and rewatch them at your leisure if you're interested in any of the issues. So again, a plea that if you found tonight's broadcast interesting, please do look out for those opportunities to follow the work of Dorset Council. Simon?
Just to add, we talked earlier about the Daily Mail article, which headlined "Scummy Ghost Town." I've just had a note from one of our directors that there is a rebuttal coming to that article in conjunction with Weymouth Town Council, which is really good to hear, because I thought it was an extraordinary, destructive piece of so-called pseudo-journalism. So I'm really glad that we're going to come out fighting on that. And I think Jane raised earlier on, sent a very kind message through. So yeah, it was nonsense, and we're going to fight back on it, which is great.
Perfect. Thank you, Simon. So we've come to the end of our session tonight. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to tune in tonight and to watch tonight's session. And please do look out for future Facebook Live sessions. But I bid you all good night, and thank you once again to all of our panel members for the comprehensive answers and the time taken to address those public questions tonight on the budget. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Bye.